America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to ask if anybody's recording this evening, if you would let us know. Thank you. Ms. Sterling has announced that she will be recording. I think this evening we will be opening with selectmen's comments. I will then turn the floor over to Chairwoman LaBrie to hear from the subcommittee on the intermunicipal manager's contract. And then we will open it up to public comments after we have heard the complete report presentation. So we'll start with selectmen's comments. Mr. Saganowitz.
I have no comments yet.
Okay. Ms. LaBrie?
Yes, I just wanted to say that when this came before us, I asked to be on the subcommittee to take a look into this because I knew that it was something that we were going to take a look at least look at it. And I wanted to be sure that when it came back before the board, I knew in my own mind that I've done the best I can to make this agreement the best it can be. So that was my reasoning for asking to be on the subcommittee, so we could bring back to the board and to the town the best possible agreement.
Thank you. Mr. Hasselby.
Thank you. Yes, I do. So first, I want to thank all the concerned citizens out there that did reach out to every single one of us. I did try to reply to everyone that did have a concern. As I think many of my colleagues and I, we're still trying to make sure that this is the right thing for Winchendon. So as we go through, I would openly suggest, if you are here or not, to reach out to any of us concerning this. We want to hear your feedback. Thank you.
I'll withhold comment at this time.
Thank you. My only comment would be that I did a lot of reflecting over the weekend because I had already heard a lot of concerns from a lot of different people. And I had to think back to how we got here. And when I was elected into this position, I promised that my job as a representative is to listen to the voters. And that's what we're here to do. We are here to listen to the voters. And it's important that I keep that promise, that you guys are the most important part of this town. You are technically the legislative body. Even though this is not a town meeting, you still need to be heard, and that's most important when we're undertaking such a dramatic step in changing the way that we know government in this town forever. It probably won't change back. Regardless of what happens with this contract, this is a major step. And so it is so important to us that we do hear from you. And for everybody that has reached out to us, it's important. We've read them all. And I've tried to respond as well to make sure that you understand that we're listening, we're paying attention, and we don't intend to do anything that would hurt the town of Winchendon. But most importantly, why we chose to do this and look at this particular situation and put us in this spot is because our town desperately needs funds. And this is a way to get money in grants from the state. And by saying no to this agreement, because I'm a little bit selfish, I agree with a lot of you, and I think that I'm not real good with sharing, and I don't always play real good in the sandbox with others. But I'm not so quick to say no, because we owe our school department, we owe our highway department, we owe our fire department, we owe our police department that we at least take a look at it and see maybe if we can bring anything good to town. With that being said, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Vice Chair LaBrie.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Audrey LaBrie, and I am before the Board of Selectmen this evening as chair of the subcommittee to create and review and then present the draft intermunicipal agreement between the towns of Winchendon and Templeton. Mike Barbaro and I were the two Winchendon representatives on that subcommittee. Mr. Hickey attended 2 of our 3 subcommittees. So I would ask, as we go through this, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to defer to either Mr. Barbaro or Mr. Hickey as needed. But before I do that, I would like to just make a statement. It has been said over the past few months by multiple people that this is too big a decision for just 5 people in town to make. Obviously, it is a big decision. My answer to that is that I believe that it is decisions such as big ones like this that is the reason that we have a representative form of government. We are elected officials. As Mrs. Anderson just said, we listen to the people, that is our job. But I don't think having a quorum of 100 people in a room trying to make a very large decision, we're not at that point anymore. So I believe that it is proper for the Board of Selectmen, with input from the citizens of the town, to make this decision on behalf of the town. The second thing I wanted to say is, again, from multiple sources, there have been comments that we're moving too fast. There's no transparency in what's been going on. Just to back up the timeline, the Board of Selectmen was first made aware of this on April 24th in an executive session meeting, the minutes of which have since been released, I believe. There was a second, which actually happens to be 3 months ago today, 7/24. There was a second executive session on May 4th, during which this was also discussed. And then the board, at the joint board meeting between Winchendon and Templeton on 6/27, that is when we formed the subcommittee to actually look at the nitty-gritty of this. So that was the first time as a board in public that this was addressed. So even though that was the first public notification of it, it had actually been in works for a couple of months. The subcommittee was made on June 27th. We met 3 times, July 6th, July 17th, and July 20th. All 3 meetings were public meetings. The first meeting, I believe we had 3 or 4 people in the audience. We recognized them, allowed them, anyone who had a question, to address the subcommittee. The meeting of the subcommittee on 7/13, there may have been 1 or 2 people there. I don't recall specifically, but if anyone had asked to speak, they would have been allowed to speak. At our meeting last Thursday on July 20th, the only person in the audience was a reporter from a local paper. So I feel that we did our due diligence. We made the meetings public. They were broadcast. I know that some people made comments based on, I'm watching the meeting now and such like that. So I think the transparency question that does not apply. We made it as transparent as we could. And as far as too fast, I know August 1st, people say that we're pushing for get this through by August 1st. That August 1st deadline happens to be related to Templeton. They have a temporary town, not manager, but administrator. And his current agreement with Templeton expires as of August 1st. At least 2 of those subcommittee meetings, myself and I believe Selectman Fortes, and if not, Selectwoman Brooks and Selectman Barbaro, stated on the record that we will not rush this. We will go through it until we feel that we have a document that is the best document that we have put together, that we could have put together. And if it ran past August 1st, it ran past August 1st. Don't know what Templeton would do. That would be their decision. They would have to deal with anything at that point. So again, I can speak for myself. I feel that we have done this in a timely manner, and we have given it to, as far as the subcommittee could go with it, enough time and attention to detail to now be in the position to bring it before the board. Any questions on anything I said?
I have a question.
Yes.
So you just mentioned that it was public, all of these were public hearings.
They were open to the public, yes.
Yes. What kind of advertisement procedures did you guys make to make the public aware of these meetings occurring?
It's listed on the town webpage.
It's listed on the town webpage.
Just as the regular Board of Selectmen meetings are, that is how it would have been put out there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I also believe there may have been notices on Facebook. I think sometimes, the agenda may have been posted. I don't know for sure, but okay.
No.
Maybe it was after the fact.
I'm curious, did they ever run and rerun like the other meetings tend to?
Yes.
So if you could catch on Saturday morning if you missed it Thursday night, just checking.
Okay, so now what I would like to do is take you through the agreement. And this is how we approached it in the subcommittee meetings. We had a template that we worked off of, and we, molded it and everything to fit Winchendon and Templeton, and we literally did this paragraph by paragraph. And then it would send it off for review, town council, etc., and in the next meeting we would do the same thing again. So if you will indulge me, I'm going to just start at the top, and I will read it for the benefit of those who are listening at home and do not have a copy in front of them. So this agreement is made and entered into on this blank day of blank, 2017, in accordance with the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 4A, by and among the town of Winchendon, acting by and through its Board of Selectmen, hereinafter referred to as Winchendon, and the town of Templeton, acting by, and through its Boards of Selectmen, hereinafter referred to as Templeton, and they are collectively referred to as the parties. Witnessed. Whereas Winchendon currently has full-time town manager in Winchendon, whose compensation and terms of employment are addressed by a contract between Winchendon and the town manager. And Templeton will have a vacancy in its municipal administrator position on August 1st, 2017. Whereas the parties seek to share the services of a single municipal manager to be referred to as the Chief Administrative Officer. And whereas more efficient and effective municipal government administration would be realized through the parties' sharing of a Chief Administrative Officer. Now, therefore, in consideration of the mutual agreements contained herein, the parties agree as follows. That's pretty much boilerplate. Okay, Article 1, Chief Administrative Officer. Section 1-1, Duties of the Chief Administrative Officer. A, the Chief Administrative Officer shall perform the duties related to municipal government administration for the parties under the policy guidance of the boards of selectmen in each community as detailed below. B, when providing services for Winchendon, 1, the Chief Administrative Officer shall perform the duties as defined by this agreement, the charter, bylaws, and policies of Winchendon, as well as such other duties as the Winchendon Board of Selectmen shall from time to time assign, and shall perform said duties in a competent and professional manner. 2, the Chief Administrative Officer shall report directly to the Board of Selectmen of Winchendon. Part C, when providing services for Templeton. 1, the Chief Administrative Officer shall perform the duties as defined by this agreement, the bylaws and policies of Templeton, as well as such other duties as the Templeton Board of Selectmen shall from time to time assign, and shall perform said duties in a competent and professional manner. 2, the Chief Administrative Officer shall report directly to the Board of Selectmen of Templeton. Any questions at the moment on Article 1, Section 1-1 from the board? No?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. Just generally, I know that this briefly explains the duties, and I know
Yeah.
we'll get there. I don't think my mic is working. Okay, there we go. I know the first page generally talks about the general duties, and I know the next pages will sort of spell that a little further. I'm just curious, and I don't have a perfect example of this, but I know that the Winchendon Board of Selectmen, we set goals and policy, basically goals for the town manager. I'm sure, I'm sure Templeton does the same. How will this work? And I know that people have talked about this with regarding maybe divided loyalties or conflicts of interest. What happens if one of our goals, one of our initiatives, conflicts with the town of Templeton? Maybe this is something for Keith to answer, or Audrey.
My interpretation is the way that this is crafted. One of the earlier drafts actually had like sub A through P, and we had listed some specific duties and things that we wanted him to do. But at some point we realized that we were just kind of repeating what the charter and the bylaws and the town policies already said. And Templeton doesn't have a charter. So we had to break this out for language for Winchendon and then language for Templeton. So whatever Winchendon defined by the agreement, our charter, our bylaws, and our policies, whatever goal that the Board of Selectmen may set for Keith, we can hold him to that because that is the goal for providing the services for Winchendon. It may not agree with what Templeton wants, but then when in Templeton, if they want to do something differently or whatever, then he will follow the agreement and the bylaws and policies of Templeton. Does that answer your question?
It does. I'm just worried about if there's ever a goal, whether it's a Templeton goal or a Winchendon goal, if there's ever a time that they conflict. I understand that while he's here, he's performing for Winchendon,
Right.
and if he has to in an emergency, he'll perform for Templeton, and vice versa. But I'm just cautious, if he's performing something for Winchendon, and it somehow, because it
Conflict of
seems like...
interest. Yep.
Sure.
I think that's addressed elsewhere, but Mr. Hickey?
Sure. I'm not sure my microphone works either, to be honest with you. So, can everybody hear me okay? So just similar to what's happening in Lennox and Lee, in any situation where there's a potential conflict, My responsibility is to notify the board chair that I believe there might be a conflict for one reason or another, and that I would remove myself from that potential conflict, and the board chair would assign a department head, excuse me, that would, or another individual, could be another board member, it could be somebody else, that would not have the same conflict I may have.
Okay.
Mr. Barbaro?
If I might add,
Yeah, that would.
in this agreement, part of what we've set up is quarterly meetings between the two boards and a subcommittee, and then an annual review in November with both boards on board, looking at, does the agreement work? Are there any conflicts? How do we resolve them? So we've put in place quarterly meetings to notify us if there's something going on, that it's not working, there's some issues to be resolved. So we thought that through as far as how many times a year we meet, and we can meet more frequently if we need to. But in the beginning, it would be, you know, and it depended upon how we want to do it, whether we want it to be subcommittee, quarterly, full board. We planned a full board in November for review, because we were going to set the town manager's review around the same time. So everything falls into play around November, so the budget gets set for December. And then if there are any major issues, then the both boards. But if, in the interim, if something comes up that's very conflict, both boards would get involved. It would start with the subcommittee. If they can't resolve it, it would go to both boards. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. I'm just looking for, I can't remember the section where you're talking about those quarterly meetings. I thought it said something like a designee
It's
by the
further
Board of
back in
Selectmen.
the agreement.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll have further questions.
We'll get
but-
there, okay. All right, thank you. All right, so moving on to Article 2. Section 2-1, Appointment, Term of Office, Qualifications. The Chief Administrative Officer shall be an employee of Winchendon, the lead community, to serve for such term as specified in the Winchendon Town Manager Employment Agreement. The Chief Administrative Officer shall devote the officer's full time to the office and shall not hold any other public office, elected or appointed, nor shall the Chief Administrative Officer engage in any other business, occupation, or profession unless such action is approved in advance by the parties. The parties may, by amendment of this intermunicipal agreement, establish other qualifications for the office of Chief Administrative Officer. Any questions on 2-1? So the town manager would be an employee of Winchendon.
Providing services to Templeton?
Correct.
Okay. So what happens, and I hope this doesn't happen for you, Keith, but if this is approved and there needs to be a disciplinary action between either it's Winchendon or Templeton, I'm guessing it's Winchendon that has to handle it. So let's say Templeton, for example, has an issue with yourself. Are they dealing with it, or is it Winchendon that's dealing with it?
Their option is to notify the town of Winchendon that they no longer want to participate in the intermunicipal agreement, and they can leave that agreement after that time frame. I'm an employee of the town of Winchendon only. So if there's discipline that has to be issued, it would have to be issued by the town of Winchendon.
So that's a little confusing, because if Winchendon doesn't have if Winchendon doesn't have an issue with you, why would we discipline you if it's Templeton, right? I mean, it just seems confusing. I mean, if I know that we're the lead community, but if our partner, and I understand, if our partner in this venture is having an issue with you, I just don't want it to seem confusing for either community, you know.
If I may.
Especially the optics.
If Templeton has, an issue that they feel is that critical, I would believe the process would be they would bring it to the Winchendon Board of Selectmen, as his employer. And then we as the board, or whoever as the board at that time, would have to look at, what they're claiming, et cetera, and then we would need to decide whether we felt it was, a disciplinary event or something like that.
I'm just thinking of a hypothetical. Let's say Templeton wants to suspend Mr. Hickey for 1 week, and Winchendon doesn't have an issue, but it's our partner in this agreement. I think maybe there should have been language about this. I don't know. I know that we're sticking to the original contract that you have with the town of Winchendon, and I know that there's language, I think, in our contract and in our personnel policies. I think that this should have something about that, because I feel it would be incredibly awkward for Winchendon to say, all right, you can't work in the town of Templeton. It just seems a little off.
So if I could, can anybody hear me now? Okay.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with this microphone. So what was discussed during the subcommittee meetings, and because Winchendon is the lead community and my employment contract is only with the town of Winchendon, any disciplinary situation would have to go through Winchendon. To select person Anderson's point a little bit earlier, if there was an issue between myself and the town of Templeton, their ability would be to request a board meeting between both boards, discuss that issue, and see if there was some type of a middle ground that could be found if possible, or an answer that could be in some way addressed. If not, I guess worst case scenario again is if they're dissatisfied, they would notify Winchendon that they will be exercising their exit agreement, exit allowance as part of this agreement.
I think that's coming up. Is that 6 months?
Yes,
Okay.
that is outlined a little bit later in the agreement.
Okay.
Okay.
All set.
All right, Article 2, Section 2-2, Powers and Duties. The Chief Administrative Officer shall be responsible to the parties for the proper administration of all municipal affairs placed under the officer's charge. The powers and duties of the Chief Administrative Officer shall include, when acting on behalf of Winchendon, those provided for this agreement, the Winchendon Charter, bylaws, and policies, and such additional powers and duties by the Winchendon Board of Selectmen, and when acting on behalf of the town of Templeton, those provided for by this agreement, the Templeton bylaws and policies, and such additional powers and duties voted by the Templeton Board of Selectmen. Bear with me one moment. I apologize. The next line should be stricken out. Strike out including but not limited to the following.
This should be stricken out.
Yes. Strike out the words including but not limited to the following. So the sentence will go from Templeton Board of Selectmen. Provided, however, that any inconsistency between such enabling legislation and this agreement, the enabling legislation shall control. I apologize for that confusion. Does everybody understand what I was saying on that sentence? CJ, did you? Okay.
Yes.
All right, any questions or comments on 2-2?
Just not a really substantive question. So Templeton doesn't have a charter or anything? No home rule? Nothing?
So they are governed by their bylaws and their policies and procedures. Because there is no town manager, there is no town charter.
Okay. So how were they established as a community? Right, isn't it usually a charter or home rule that establishes a community?
There are different rules and regulations or state statutes for the different types of government or types of governments that can be established, whether it be a city, a town, with a mayor, potentially, or a town council, or a board of selectmen, or,
So so their bylaws establish everything, their form of government, their employees, everything. Okay.
the statute sets up the type of government that it is. The bylaws get into more specifics, just like they do here, on how different processes are managed.
Okay. One of those questions, sorry.
Sure. And that's part of what we wrestled with, because both towns have, different ways of doing things and different rules and regs to follow, so we try to break it out. So Winchendon's a part of Winchendon and Templeton's a part of Templeton. All right, moving on, section 2-3, compensation. A, the chief administrative officer shall receive such compensation as set forth herein for FY18, see figure 1 below, and as negotiated by Winchendon Board of Selectmen and Town Manager no later than December 31st of each year, all subject to appropriation. B, Winchendon shall be responsible for 60% and Templeton for 40% of all costs associated with the Chief Administrative Officer. Again, please see figure 1. Payment shall be made by Templeton to Winchendon on a monthly basis by the 15th of each month in 12 equal payments. The annual FY18 costs for the town of Templeton shall be prorated according to the agreed-upon start date of the IMA. C, increases in costs for Templeton as listed below shall not exceed 15% in year 2 and 18% in year 3 of the agreement without the approval of both parties. D, the retirement cost included in figure 1 is an estimate. Upon receipt of actual retirement costs from Worcester County Retirement System, the retirement costs included in figure 1 shall be reviewed, and the annual cost to Templeton will be adjusted accordingly prior to the end of the fiscal year. And then we have the figure 1, which outlines the numbers. Before we get to figure 1 and then the footnote, A, B, C, D. Any questions from the board?
I did have a question. According on A, it states that the Winchendon Board of Selectmen will negotiate with the town manager by December 31st of each year. We currently enjoy a 3-year contract with our manager. Does this state that we will be?
That's the annual review, which we would, if we would give him raises, would be by that point.
Okay.
So, if let me take 2 points here, because there's another point I think you're going to come to, and I want to get to it. So, our annual review with the town manager, we would review him, and in his contract, we have a percentage of increases built into that. Excuse me. If the town manager gets to that point where he would get that annual increase, that would bring that figure up. But it has to be done by December 31st for budgetary reasons on both sides. I know where everyone's going. If you look at C, where they have the fixed cost, there was a lot of discussion of the 15 and 18%. They were, part of their apprehension, just like everybody else has, is that if we decided to give Keith a $50,000 raise, not that it was going to happen, they would have no protection in it.
Okay.
The agreement between both parties was, my sticking point was, if healthcare goes crazy, that is an area where we would come back and explain to them that our healthcare costs have gone higher than 15% per year, because at this point no one knows where healthcare is going. So we built that into the agreement to come back on specific points. So I hope that kind of lays out where, so that we talked about that for quite a long time, of how to make sure that in the event that something like that happened, how we would address it. So that's why both parties would sit down and talk, because we usually get our healthcare costs in for the next year in and around December, so we have fixed costs. If for some reason the GIC goes cuckoo, then we could adjust the cost, and it would be laid out so everybody could see it.
Okay, thank you.
Sandwich?
Do you have another one?
No.
Just a question about salary. Is it Winchendon that ultimately decides the salary? Is it sort of like a joint negotiation? Just Winchendon?
Yeah, because we are his employer.
Okay, that reminds me. Last time I think we did a review, the Board of Selectmen stressed that we should sort of think about putting together something in his employment contract about performance, and if that correlates to a raise. I know we haven't done that since, but I think that maybe it would be important just to bring up as a reminder for the Board of Selectmen, especially where we're going to get into evaluation season at some point, just so we can think about that.
If I might.
Yes, Ms.
If this
Barbara?
agreement goes forward, we have to renegotiate the cut in salary of the day for the town manager, so that would be in negotiations.
So are these
Another-
just sample numbers, or is this the number that was negotiated by the subcommittee?
This is the numbers that we currently are paying him now. These are actual numbers, and what our agreement with Keith is for a weekly salary, and it's split 60-40.
So the total number of, it would be what, about 170?
Okay. Yeah,
That's what it says.
correct.
Between the two towns, it would be 170, but not on Winchendon.
The way that,
Right, so it's at the same, if you were to correlate it to an hourly rate, is that what you're saying, or how does that work?
So what this example shows is my annual salary is $125,000 a year right now. What I did was, and that's based on a 4-day work week. So what I did was divide the 125 by 4, multiply it by 3, which is what I would be here in Winchendon, in the office in Winchendon. That figure came to the $93,750.
Okay.
I then am going to be working, because I'll be working a 5-day work week, what I proposed, what was discussed and what was proposed was that I would take that same daily rate and apply that for 2 days to Templeton, which equals the which equals the $62,500.
Okay. So if you, okay, I see what you're saying.
So there's, if I could, just to clarify, there is no raise. I'm not receiving a wage adjustment on my current salary.
You're just working
What
an
I'm
extra
receiving
day.
is I'm applying my current salary to a 5-day work week rather than a 4-day work week.
Right. So, well, sometimes you work 5 days here anyways.
Still might.
yep, nights, weekends, whatever, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whatever.
Yeah.
Ultimately, again, I've heard that, and not to get off track too much here, but I've heard from a couple of people, this is you're gonna go from full-time to part-time. That's just not the case. My workload isn't gonna change here. I may be sitting in this building potentially 3 days a week rather than 4 during normal business hours, but that doesn't mean I won't be here evenings or weekends or what have you to get my full-time job done.
Sure.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Hickey? How often is their current town administrator sitting in his seat?
I think it varies right now. I haven't asked him that question. I know he's not there every day, certainly. But
2.
2 days a week, I guess.
And 2
Maybe,
days a
maybe,
week?
yeah, maybe Selectman Barbaro had that conversation. I have not, but I know he's there for board meetings, but how often he's there beyond that, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
All right, so figure 1, as the discussion was just on the amount, it's prorated, or it's calculated for a 5-day work week. So the salary, it's not the salary that's changed, but it's the hours of work. He'll be working more hours. Hence, you see some differences. The car allowance, retirement, this is something that we spend a lot of time on. There's no numbers listed in here. And if you look at the footnote, and I'll read the footnote. Notwithstanding any other provision of Section 2-3 to the contrary, the retirement cost is not included in Figure 1. Following consultation with the Chair of the Templeton Board of Selectmen, Winchendon shall hire an actuary to estimate retirement costs for the Chief Administrative Officer for each year of this agreement, the cost for which actuary shall be shared by the parties in accordance with the provisions of Section 2-3B of this agreement, with Templeton paying its share to Winchendon on the 15th of the month after the actuarial report is received. Upon receipt from the actuary of the estimated FY18 retirement cost, the retirement cost included in Figure 1 shall be revised to list that cost. As appropriate, the FY18 cost will then be adjusted accordingly prior to the end of the fiscal year, with each of the parties paying its proportional share hereunder in FY18. And as I said, we just had quite a discussion on retirement, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Hickey, but when we get the figure from the Worcester County Retirement Board, it's just one figure for all the people eligible at that time. And as far as trying to take that and break it down to one particular person at any snapshot in time, that's what an actuarial report would do. So Templeton was concerned about not having it in there, but in good conscience, we couldn't put a number in there because we don't know what it is at this point. So that was a stickler for a while for us. Health insurance, Medicare, life insurance, dues, conference and training. And these are all things that are already covered under his contract. This is just breaking out the expense between Winchendon and Templeton, who would pay which share.
So this overall number will go up once we get the number?
By the retirement, yeah. And they would pay, I know we said Templeton, like the 15th of every month, they would make that monthly payment. And at whatever point, just sometime before the end of that fiscal year, whatever that retirement number is, they'll make that payment. There's something else I was going to say on that. Anything else from the board on Figure 1? All right. Moving on. Section 2-4, Acting Chief Administrative Officer. Temporary absence. The Chief Administrative Officer shall designate a person to serve as Acting Chief Administrative Officer to exercise the powers and perform the duties of the office during the officer's temporary absence. Should the temporary absence exceed 10 business days, the parties may, by majority vote of the full Board of Selectmen of each town, appoint another qualified officer or employee of either town to serve as Acting Chief Administrative Officer until the Chief Administrative Officer shall return and resume such officer's duties. B, vacancy. Any vacancy in the office of Chief Administrative Officer shall be filled as soon as possible by the parties. But pending such appointment, the parties shall, by majority vote of the full Board of Selectmen of each town, appoint another qualified officer or employee of either town to exercise the powers and perform the duties of the Chief Administrative Officer on an acting basis. The appointment of an Acting Chief Administrative Officer shall be for a term not to exceed 3 months, provided, however, that the parties may renew such temporary appointment as needed or appoint some other qualified person to serve in 3-month increments. C, powers and duties. The powers of an acting chief administrative officer shall be limited to matters not admitting of delay, provided, however, no acting chief administrative officer under A above shall have authority to make any permanent appointment to or removal from any office or position in either town. Any questions from the board on 2-4? Mr. Zaganowitz.
Just, I know that our town charter has language regarding acting and interim. It seems like this language sort of falls in line with that.
It's copied from that.
Okay.
Because I don't think Templeton had anything, did they?
No, so we made sure that the language in this agreement was consistent with the town charter.
So town charter has acting and interim. This is basically the same thing.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, you have temporary, I think, when we went through, a few years ago, you were officially the temporary or for a little bit, and then we hired Bernie.
We had the police chief.
Right.
That's right, we had the police chief.
Right.
And then we brought in,
Okay.
I can't, what's his last name?
Lynch.
Oh, my God.
How could you forget that?
Thinking of Copelman. No, that's Copelman and Page. Sorry, Bernie. Okay, any further questions on section 2-4? Members of the board, all right, thank you. All right. Section 2-5, appointment and removal. A, appointment. Upon a vacancy in the office of Chief Administrative Officer, the parties shall meet to discuss the appointment process, and the Templeton Board of Selectmen shall be entitled to participate in that process, including, but not limited to, jointly interviewing final candidates. As the lead community, and after consultation with the Templeton Board of Selectmen at a joint meeting, the Winchendon Board of Selectmen shall appoint the Chief Administrative Officer consistent with its charter. B.
Can I ask a question before?
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to be tactful, so I have to think of my words very carefully. It's taken them 4 years to try to find a town manager, and they're in a predicament. 4 years, and we're supposed to work with them and try to move this along a little bit. And again, I'm going to resort back to what sometimes I don't play well in the sandbox with others.
Understood. We did have some discussion on this point. I think the feeling was that should this agreement move forward, and we are in a position where we have this mutual agreement, then Templeton should have a seat at the table for the preliminary discussions, the preliminary interviews. But ultimately, as the employer, it is Winchendon Board of Selectmen who would do the final hire. But we felt that it would be provident to have them part of that process.
Okay. But we have ultimate decision when we make that decision.
Correct. Winchendon has the hiring decision. I don't like sitting here. I can't keep everybody back here.
Saying, where's that in writing?
It says the Winchendon Board of Selectmen shall appoint the Chief Administrative Officer, consistent with its charter. But I really kind of want it clarified that we have I don't want to say sole authority, but.
Okay, council looked at this and they seem to feel that sentence
I want to make sure that's perfectly clear.
does give the Board of Selectmen shall appointment, the Winchendon Board of Selectmen. But anything else on A from the board? Okay, thank you. B, removal. 1, the Winchendon Board of Selectmen may, by majority vote of the full board, terminate and remove or suspend the town manager from office in accordance with the following procedure. Before the town manager may be removed, if so demanded, shall be given a written statement of the reasons alleged for removal and shall have a right to be heard publicly thereon at a meeting of the Board of Selectmen prior to a final vote on removal. But pending and during such hearing, the Board of Selectmen may suspend the manager from office. The action of the Board of Selectmen in suspending or removing the town manager from office shall be final, it being the intention of this provision to vest all authority and to fix all responsibility for such suspension or removal solely in the Winchendon Board of Selectmen. The town manager shall continue to receive the salary until the effective date of a final vote of removal. 2, Templeton shall be responsible for its share of payments for any severance or paid administrative leave. 3, if the chief administrative officer is eligible to collect unemployment compensation, the parties shall share equally in those unemployment costs. Any questions about B? Again, as the lead community in the agreement and as the employer, we have the authority to terminate or remove or suspend. Templeton does not.
I just want to reiterate that I just really like the stronger wording in the removal, that it's solely in the Winchendon Board of Selectmen, just that particular part.
Okay.
I want that up in the hiring as well.
And to fix all responsibility for such supervision. Okay. It does say solely in the Winchendon Board of Selectmen.
Right, but I just like that, it to be up with the, in section
Oh,
A.
insert the word solely. Okay.
Right, that even though we will consult with them, the actual hiring again
Okay. Yep.
should be, it rests with us. I'm not waiting
So-
4 years.
Of the back in A as a lead community after consultation. Yeah, we'll have to figure out the wording to put the word solely in A under appointment. It is solely the Winchendon Board of Selectmen's. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Okay, sure.
Just
Once again, it's
number 3, equally or proportionally?
equally.
So 50%? Okay.
Yep.
Now, what's the difference? Why the difference in proportions there?
I think it was their suggestion to make it 50-50, and
I mean,
it makes sense to us, so we agreed to that.
think of numbers, yeah, it's better for us. I'm just wondering if there was an explanation for that.
Nope.
All right.
Any other questions from the board on section B? All right, thank you. Section 2-6, schedule of the chief administrative officer. A, the chief administrative officer shall be physically located in Winchendon 3 days per week and in Templeton 2 days per week, except as circumstances otherwise require. I'll get back to that in a second. The parties acknowledge that the duties of the chief administrative officer may be performed from either town as necessary. This is one of the paragraphs that I think went through more changes because we wanted it to be clear that if he's in Templeton and Winchendon has a situation, he will leave Templeton and come to Winchendon. He will do what needs as circumstances require. And vice versa. If it's a ordinary day in Winchendon and Templeton has an emergency, vice versa. So we struggled over that for a bit to try to get it. We had paragraphs like this, and then council slowly kind of whittled it down. All right, a couple more under that same section. B, the designees of the party shall meet no less than quarterly to review implementation of this agreement. C, there shall be an annual review of the chief administrative officer's job performance conducted by the parties in November of each year. Okay, any questions from the board on 2-6?
Yes. Do you have one?
Just,
Selectman Hustleby?
I don't know, it seemed like he was going to say something. So
Yeah.
Yes, what's the winning number tomorrow night?
ask my question, CJ.
Ask your
No,
question.
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. I'm reading you. So, Madam Chair, just really quick, especially the first 3 or 4 months, there could be times and opportunities that Mr. Hickey is getting used to the systems of Templeton, so there may be opportunities where he's there more often than the possible 2 days a week, getting acclimated to the systems of Templeton, getting used to the layout. Maybe there's a little bit more work he needs to do in Templeton than in Winchendon because there are systems in place already that he's put. Would that cause an issue whatsoever?
Well, I can't speak, speaking for myself, I would encourage him to find an alternate way to become familiar with Templeton. If his contract says he's here 3 days, then I would expect him to be here 3 days, whether it's an evening or something else like that.
So on that point as well, if for some reason we were to pass this charter, I would want that language to be specific that he would have to be here at least 3 days a week during normal business hours, even though sometimes it is called upon that he is to be needed in Templeton and vice versa.
Okay,
I would just
yeah.
like to see that language clarified that
Normal
he
business
would be
hours.
here on those specific,
Okay,
at least 3 business days per week, if something were to occur.
right, okay. So
Uh,
just 3 days per week.
But during normal business hours, is that what you said?
Right, so
Yeah.
let's just say on a Tuesday, he's supposed to be working here, but in Templeton needed services, so he went over there. I would expect him to either take the Thursday or Friday to be back here, so that he is here for at least 3 business days per week.
Okay,
Not that that should be the norm,
right,
but just in those extenuating circumstances, I want that to be made perfectly clear.
okay.
I believe that it is very clear when it says, "The chief administrative officer shall be physically located in Winchendon 3 days per week."
Except as circumstances otherwise require.
Right, which would mean an emergency. But
Yeah, but
his,
it doesn't say emergency.
but that's what other circumstances require means, in the event of an emergency,
Yeah.
where something happened and he'd have to come back, but
I think one of our drafts, we tried to outline the circumstances where he might have to leave one and go to the other, and it just got so cumbersome
Well-
that this was actually council's verbiage on this.
So that's what I'm wondering. I mean, emergency circumstances, you would love for us, and especially I'm sure the people that are here, you would love to know what those emergency circumstances are. I'm wondering if that would be too technical, but I had the same concern. If Templeton has an emergency at 7 a.m., and I know Keith's here at 7 a.m., and he decides he has to go to Templeton. I think the one thing that people like about Keith is he's available, especially during the day. They can come in, and most of the time he'll say, "Yeah, come right in." If he's finding that he's spending more time in Templeton during normal business hours, is that a positive for Winchendon?
And then to that
Yep,
point
that's a
as
valid
well,
question.
just because we are paying Keith to be, Mr. Hickey here, to be here at least 3 days per week, I would just want to make sure that that's being upheld in specific language that clearly states that he'll be here 3 days a week. Although it's only in certain circumstances, I
Right.
would just like to see that clear, since we are paying him for that time.
Mr. Hickey?
Thanks. So let me just, I guess, be as clear as I can. I think, to agree with Mr. Barbaro, I think the language states that I'm going to be here physically 3 days a week. To use your example, I'm sure there will be a time at the very beginning of this situation, if it does move forward, that I'm going to have to be in Templeton more than 2 days a week. That's going to be nights and weekends. I'm going to be in this building 3 days a week during business hours. That's the intent. I think the language states that. I'm telling you publicly. I'd ask you to put in the minutes verbatim. I'm going to be here 3 days a week. If an emergency occurs in either community, and that goes both ways,
Right.
I will attend to that emergency. If I need to be, excuse myself from the community I'm in and come to the other community, I'll do that. But I'll let the board know that that's happening, what's occurring, and why I need to go. Again, I think you've got to a certain extent, you've got to rely on my professional judgment to make those types of decisions. I don't think that we can include, you can wordsmith this any way you'd like, and I'm open to making any criteria you want to have in this agreement.
Sure.
In this agreement. The subcommittee and the town attorney tried to craft this so it was very plain that I was going to be here 3 days a week. I was going to be in Templeton 2 days a week. If there was anything outside and above that, which there will be for both communities, especially at certain times of the year, it's my responsibility to get that work done on off hours, whatever that happens to be. I appreciate the fact that people are comfortable coming in and walking in the door, and my door's always open. They'll have an inconvenience of that not happening one more day a week. So it'll be 2 days. So it'll be 1 day a week that we're open here. That I won't be here. The day that one of the days I will be in Templeton will be on a Friday when this building is closed. So instead of somebody walking in the door 4 days a week to see me, they'll be able to walk in the door 3 days a week to see me, and that will be an adjustment. There's no question about that, and I'm sure I'll be facing the same situation in Templeton. They're used to having somebody who's going to be there more than 2 days a week. It's an adjustment, and I understand that, and I think that at least I'm hoping that people understand that, and when they see that the level of service they provided and the quality of work that continues, that having to come back the next day or having to make an appointment after adjusting to that need will be just habit. So I understand the concern. Am I going to be here Friday, Saturday, and Sunday? Those are my 3 days? No. My 3 days are 1 day other than Friday, which we're closed for anyways. And other than that, I'll be here like I normally am.
And, sorry, just to add on to that, just for public record, I just want to make sure that I think that Mr. Hickey does an outstanding job, and this is not targeted towards him. It's just in the case that if we ever were to get another town manager or somebody that we necessarily don't know what their intentions would be, I just want to make sure that we're covered in that case as well. That's why I want to bring this language forward. Even if the intent is for it to be there, I want it to be clearly stated just in the case that we were to ever have turnover, and just so that it's perfectly clear that if they wanted to go find out about the systems, or they wanted to go do that, that's not on Winchendon's time. They would have to go to Templeton during the weekends. And I know that's what Mr. Hickey would do anyways. Yeah. But I just want to make sure that's perfect.
Sure. No, that's fine. And I would be fine with, adding in Winchendon 3 business days. 3 business. And I think what we were discussing was those 3 days would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Originally, we're thinking about maybe Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, but we felt that having the consecutive days would be most beneficial. And then Thursday, and then Friday, which we are closed, he would be in Templeton. That was the recommendation. Mr. Barbaro.
And also that Templeton is going to close their town hall on Monday and shift it to Friday. And they've already spoken to their employees about that. So we'll have 3 consistent days. They'll have 2 consistent days.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. So anything else on B or C? This is, Austin, this is where we were talking about the quarterly review, and then an annual review. And we said, no less than quarterly. So we could meet more often if we felt that someone needed to be. And I think, as Mikey maybe said earlier, whether when we get to those quarterly reviews, whether it's, the same subcommittee, another subcommittee, or full boards, that could be decided upon, if we ever get to that point. Anything else from the board on that section? Okay. Article 3, term, section 3-1. I'm sorry, I'm just going to back up. So, Keith, did you stick the name, business days? If you would,
I'd be happy to make that
if you would
change.
please, yeah,
Sure.
3 business days per week. 2-6A. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that. Section 3-2, I'm sorry, 3-1. This agreement shall become effective upon signing and shall terminate on June 30th, 2020. If at any time one of the parties would like to terminate this agreement, written notice thereof shall be received by the other party no later than December 31st of that fiscal year, as outlined in Article 4. Provided further, however, that the terminating party shall be responsible for its share of all costs under Section 2-3 for the remainder of that fiscal year. If notice is provided thereafter, then the terminating party shall be responsible for an amount equal to Templeton's share of the ensuing fiscal year costs under Section 2-3. I'm just going to go back because we spent a lot of time on this one. Termination. If at any time one of the parties would like to terminate the agreement, written notice, as outlined in 4, shall be received by the other party no later than December 31st of that fiscal year. And we wanted to make it December 31st, a couple reasons. Number one, I think in the contract, you need to give 6 months' notice if you're not going to renew a town manager's contract, which is December 31st. But it also makes it so that we would know by December 31st if Templeton wants out. So once we go into budget season, January, February, we will know whether or not this is going to be continued on to the following fiscal year.
But what if I want out in June 1st?
We'll get to that in just a second.
Okay.
Okay. The terminating party shall be responsible. So if Templeton wants out December 31st, they still need to pay their portion of this entire fiscal year through June 30th. Do you get that? Okay. Otherwise, we would be in a big hole all of a sudden halfway through the year because we would have done our budget based on the full year of Templeton's input. To Selectman Anderson's point, the last sentence. If notice is provided thereafter, after December 31st, then the terminating party shall be responsible for an amount equal to Templeton's share of the ensuing fiscal year costs. So this goes into effect, I'm just going to throw some September 1st of 2017. Works good for the first whatever period. And come February, we're now past the December 31st cutoff date. Come February, Templeton says, we can't stand this, we want out. They would pay for the remainder of this fiscal year, and they would pay for the next year. Because we do that to protect the budgetary process. Because if we get notice on June 15th that Templeton wants out, we have already budgeted for the next fiscal year based on Templeton's portion. Is that making sense at all?
I'm trying to turn it around in my head. What if it's us that wants out?
Okay, if we back out in an untimely manner, we were using the term untimely, then we would have to pay Templeton's figure for the ensuing fiscal year. Because if otherwise, they would be left in a budgetary crisis.
But they haven't paid it yet.
So we would, could I just jump in?
Yeah,
so we would have to
absolutely.
pay Templeton's share. Plus, we would also have to probably go back to town meeting to reappropriate the town manager's salary because we would only appropriate, let's say it's 107, right? We'd have to go back to town meeting and ask for an adjustment. Plus, we'd have to pay Templeton's share. And the next year, right? We'd have to pay the ensuing year as well. So 60,000 plus.
We would have to pay Templeton's share of the ensuing year, correct?
So just, if I could, just to play this out a little bit. So, if this agreement's put in place, we'll be having meetings either as full boards or as subcommittees of both boards on at least a quarterly basis to discuss issues. There shouldn't be any surprises here unless something completely off the wall occurs. So as you're working through the fiscal year, my evaluations typically has been done in November. You'll have the opportunity to do my evaluation. So you'll get some input from the town of Templeton's Board of Selectmen as well. You'll have the ability at that point to discuss whether there's one or more things that one or more of the groups aren't satisfied with, and it'll be reflected in my evaluation. We discussed this for quite some time because as we develop by December 31st, typically I have just about finished up my budget in preparation to present to the Board of Selectmen, as has the town administrator in Templeton. And if either community wants to remove themselves from the intermunicipal agreement, they can do that with notification by December 31st. That allows either community to properly budget for the town manager or town administrator position in their communities and not be underfunded. If either community decided in sometime after December 31st of that year, we just don't want to go this direction more, it's not working for us, that leaves the other community with a budgetary hole to have to be filled. Both communities, I believe, are, if they're not close to the tax cap, they're awful close. So to suggest that we could just increase the budget to fully fund the position, if the board wanted to do that, you may have to cut the budget someplace else to do that.
Right. Well, that's, if you don't mind. I mean, unfortunately, I don't see the cost of running Winchendon or Templeton going down. So it's not that we would have to cut anything. I mean, right now, we raise enough where we can run the town. Like last year, we weren't in a deficit. And realistically, I mean, the budget isn't totally done December 31st. I mean, we still have a couple months until May 4th or the first Monday of May.
February at the very latest.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I think even this year was, it was, February, March. So that still gives enough time for each community. I think, Templeton has a different town meeting schedule than we do. So it's not like you would have to really rush. I mean, yes, you would have to readjust, certainly, especially for Winchendon.
Well, I think you could put a date of February if you want to put a February date in there. The challenge you have is, again, you're having, at that point, if you had a February date and Templeton backed out of the agreement or notified you they're going to be done that June, the challenge you have now is you're reacting and having to find some amount of money to fund the entire cost of the town manager position. What the subcommittee, I think, was trying to do was try to be more proactive and try to allow for the community to more properly plan for the need to fund a certain amount of money for that position. Because again, it's not going to be, while budgets aren't finalized in December, you're right, they're pretty close in the town manager's eyes to be ready to present to the board in both communities. And what I would be forced to do is go back and make a cut in some line item or items to fund the needed money that had just come to light. Right. We aren't as fortunate as a lot of communities that have a tax cap ceiling that we aren't anywhere near. Right. We're awfully close to it, if not touching it, most of the time. And you could potentially use free cash if you had that on an annual basis, but I think I would suggest to you it's a poor financial decision to make on an operating cost that repeats from year to year. So, again, the time frame was to try to be proactive with this. Right. If the board wants to move it to February, I wouldn't suggest it, but that was the rationale behind the December 31st.
I wasn't suggesting February. I was just talking about the timeline that has been pretty standard since we've been here. the budget wasn't completely finalized in December. It was
But I think it's a good
probably
idea.
early spring, late winter, you could say. So I can understand maybe a community. I can go along with the community having to pay the remainder of that year, but I just don't understand, especially with the schedule that we've seen, the budgetary schedule. I just don't understand the ensuing year. I mean, yes, certainly you'd have to have some work in readjusting the budget, but I just don't see how. I just don't understand how that can happen. Especially, you would have to. Let's say we stick with this number. Let's say once they cancel, let's say they have to pay $30,000, and then you have to pay the ensuing year, which would be $68,000. That's a big chunk that you also have to take out of next year's budget.
Absolutely correct. And the purpose of that is to make it hard to get out of this after December 31st.
Yeah.
You know, it's a penalty. I'm sorry,
if-
CJ first.
Oh, sorry. May I make a proposal if we were to pass this? I do agree with Selectman Saganowitz that December 31st, you would, maybe January and February, you'd have enough time to find the necessary funds, but after February 31st, which I think is also your point as well, I mean, after February 28th, excuse me, you wouldn't have the necessary time to find those funds. So maybe setting thresholds, so December 31st, you pay the rest of the year until February 28th. After February 28th, then you pay that year and the following year.
If I might,
Maybe.
if I might, if, let's say, we're notified December 31st that we don't want to stay in the agreement. Keith will continue to work there till June 30th.
Yep.
Okay?
So that explains
He will
paying the
finish,
remainder.
he will finish the fiscal year there,
Right.
okay? The reason why the other thing was put in there was because if in, say, February, we decided, hey, I don't want this, we're not happy with this agreement. Everybody's budget's set, now you have to go and make a lot of adjustments to the budget. Not only that is, now, a search committee has to be formed, timelines have to be met to do that, to get in place. Additional funds have to be done. It's sort of, and the same thing for them. If they decide they want to get out, if you decide, just say in June, you're not happy, as long as they're notified by December 31st for the next fiscal year, we're out.
But you still have to pay for that year.
No,
They
we're
will
gonna
still
finish
pay till the end of that fiscal year,
Right. Not the
but just not
following
the
year.
following year.
It's
So
it's
July-
more geared,
so
it's
if-
more
if-
geared to the beginning of the budgetary season, where once we develop a budget and funds are put in place, in June, you say, hey, we don't like this. He's gonna work out that following year and be out.
So if July 2nd, and I maybe I have to think about this more. If July 2nd you want out, he still works for 6 months, but you still have to pay the full year,
The full
right?
year.
So that would be, let's stick with these numbers, 100,000. Plus you have to pay the ensuing year, which is another 100,000.
So I just,
Can I suggest some wording that would make this clearer?
Excuse me just a moment. Chairwoman Labrie, since you are moderating the floor, we have somebody that would like to speak. Would you like to allow him to?
Yes.
Please step forward.
Microphone.
If I may, just to provide assistance and some clarification and not so much as commenting at this time.
Thank you. Yes, no, this is not at all a comment. This is merely suggested wording to make this section clearer, where it says, notice shall be received by either party no later than December 31st of the fiscal year preceding the fiscal year within which the termination shall take place. That makes clear, I think, what you're trying to say.
Would you say it again, please?
Can I say it twice?
December 31st.
First, the fiscal year preceding the fiscal year within which the termination shall take place. So if the termination is going to take place in June of 2019, to meet this, it has to be notification by December 31st, 2018.
Right.
And the matching change would be in the last sentence, amount equal to Templeton's share of the fiscal year costs within which the termination takes place.
Did you say that again? Templeton's share of the ensuing?
Templeton's share of the fiscal year costs within, somehow put termination takes place, or termination fiscal year.
Within the fiscal year of termination.
So you're paying for the cost. If it's later, you're paying for the cost of the year within which that termination takes place. Again, no comment, just trying to make very clear what I think you're saying.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm sure we'll revisit that at some point anyway.
Yeah, okay. So you get the idea of what we were trying to do? And, let me get back to here.
Excuse me just a moment. Mr. Wait for the end, I've got a question about this. Yeah, questions and stuff we're gonna take at the end and comments. I hope I don't forget it. Me too.
Need a pen? Okay. Again, one of the paragraphs that we really struggled over the wording on. And it is harsh. But at the same time, if you back out of an agreement and someone else is counting on what you're going to pay, it could wreak fiscal havoc. So that's why we're trying to make sure that both sides are covered.
And again, the bulk of this is going to be, if there are any issues, we're going to address them through subcommittees or meetings between the joint boards. So, it has to be a solid reason. You can't say, I don't like this agreement, I don't think it's working, but state no examples. If you want to go into it, you have to have, you got to look at this from the saying, we have quarterly meetings that will address any issues that come up. And I tell you right now, there will be bumps in the road in the beginning to get it working. But we'll work through them. That's what the subcommittee or the full boards will meet to continue to discuss this agreement. Once you get through the first couple of months and things are smooth, I think it'll be seamless. And any issues that come up will be discussed between the subcommittees of the boards. It's just, it's there to protect both budgetary processes through the thing, because we still fund the manager's position almost to the full extent. They do not. And there was a lot of discussion on, because originally it said we would pay the full price to them, and we were like, no, we're not paying you 170 grand. So we came to a happy medium, which would be their share on both ends, because they were going to pay their share if they terminate it, and initially the language was we pay the full share, so we backed it down to their share, if that makes any sense. Because for their budgetary reasons, they're going to need to go out and get a search and get a town manager. And in the middle of the year, it makes it very difficult to do that.
Right.
If that is any help.
Right.
Sorry, now, you said something. You said it has to be, a solid reason for termination?
I'm just saying
What was the language?
I'm not saying I'm not saying assault. What I'm trying to say is, you just can't say, one person said, I don't like the agreement because I don't, you need to work on things between the boards if there's an issue.
But if the board just decides,
If the board just
We could.
decides that they don't want to do it, that's fine.
but there's nothing that says it has to be I'll use your words, I know that's not what you meant, but solid reason, if the board
Correct.
just decides.
Right, yeah, no, there's no.
The Board of
no, but
Temp-
I'm you just,
So what's a solid reason? I just want out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was that, if after quarterly meetings or, we have a problem, we try to work it out, we can't work anything out, the Board of Templeton can send notice to us and just say, we're exercising our option of termination. This is your notice. No reason given.
Okay, with all due respect, can we move along, because we have a lot of people that came to speak.
Yep.
I have something to
Sorry,
say.
it's just very important. I had a lot of questions.
From them.
Yeah. Okay, Article 4, notices. Notices pursuant to this agreement shall be sent by first-class mail, postage prepaid with return receipt, or certified mail to the attention of the chairman of the Board of Selectmen at their respective town hall. The notice date shall be the date of receipt thereof. Any question on that? Pretty straightforward. If they're going to send notice of anything, we need to have it signed, sealed, delivered, date stamped. Okay, Article 5, Section 5-1, General Provisions. Unless otherwise provided in the agreement, the parties shall act by majority vote of the full Board of Selectmen. B, no change or modification of this agreement shall be valid unless in writing and signed by the parties. C, this agreement shall constitute the entire agreement between parties. D, if any provision or portion of this agreement is held unconstitutional, invalid, or otherwise unenforceable, the remainder of this agreement or portion hereof shall be deemed severable, shall not be affected, and shall remain in full force and effect. Any questions about that? Basically it says if one part is unenforceable, the rest of it still stands. Okay. Last section, Article 6, dual indemnification. Section 6-1, each party shall hold harmless and indemnify the other party from any claims, suits, or actions arising from the actions or omissions of the Chief Administrative Officer while providing services to the indemnifying party. This provision shall survive the term of this agreement. Any questions from the board on that last section? Nothing from the, that was legal counsel's verbiage.
So, let me just think about this. Okay, so, and Keith, I hope you don't do this, but if you commit like a crime in Templeton,
Correct.
is Winchendon responsible to indemnify? Okay, all right.
No.
Okay. I'm just a little confused. I'm not a lawyer yet.
I like that. Yeah, you're going to be there.
Okay, all right. So if an action arises where you have to go to court or something for Templeton, Templeton pays their all of the fees, not proportional, right?
Yes, I mean, I think this section, it really reflects if I do something wrong in Templeton, that the town of Winchendon is not going to be held liable for whatever I did.
Okay, good.
And vice versa.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. I would prefer to remain here at the moment until, while we take questions from the public.
You want to remain there while they come up to the microphone?
Yes,
Okay. Who would like to come
because
first?
at the moment I'm still in my subcommittee mode, not my BOS mode.
I know, I'm worried about Mr. McAllister.
My name is Richard McAllister. I live at 150 Murdoch Ave, Winchendon. I just want to get this straight. I don't have a college education. You said that if the town of Winchendon or Templeton want to back out of the contract, the agreement, they have to pay the rest of the year plus the following year. Is that correct?
The way that the agreement is written now, yes. That was part of the language that
No.
Mr. Miller...
No,
Beg pardon?
no. If by December 31st,
Time.
we decide that we don't want to stay in the agreement, we will pay our share. He will stay in that position till the end of the fiscal year. If in the event after that, you pull out of the agreement, for budgetary reasons, the other party is responsible for Templeton's share. If Templeton pulls out, they pay their share for the following fiscal year, after December 31st. If we decide after December 31st, we don't want to be in the agreement, we would then pay Templeton's share for the following year. But he would stay in office till June 30th.
instead of, because I know it's kind of confusing, because we're talking fiscal year, et cetera, if it said,
I can make it clearer.
okay.
What I want to know is if the town of Winchendon opts out after the December, could it cost Winchendon a lot more money than they realize?
If the board, whatever who is sitting on the board at that time, if it ever comes, if they make the decision to opt out, what I'm thinking is maybe we could say from July 1st to December 31st, you can opt out and you just pay for the rest of that fiscal year. Does that make sense? And then if you opt out from January 1st to June 30th, then there's some ramification for the following year.
Right.
Does that make sense? Put some actual dates on it and let's say after.
I think what Mr. McAllister might be asking is the minimum, if we opted out, and this is something I wasn't aware of, the minimum it's going to cost us is $68,000. Is that correct? No?
If it's,
No,
well,
but I'm sorry, let's back up. Yes, if the board decides to opt out from like January 1st to
So I
June
was correct?
30th, when the budget is already set for the next year, then yes, they do so with the understanding that there's going to be a penalty.
So it could cost Winchendon more money.
It could.
Yes.
If the Board of Selectmen, and actually, if you think about it, the Winchendon Board of Selectmen holds the employment contract. So if things are so bad, you know, it may be an employment issue also.
Thank you. Thank you.
yeah, I don't think it's so.
It's not on. Did this last year to me too.
Well,
Maybe it's you.
Can I just make a comment now about my opinion?
Yes, sir.
All right. My opinion is that the town of Winchendon does not need this agreement. Town of Winchendon hired a town manager full-time. And the people of Winchendon, citizens, voted you selectmen in to act on our behalf. And I believe if you have a town meeting or take a poll, you will see most of Winchendon does not want this. Somehow, some way, Winchendon is going to get gypped. It's going to cost us more than we thought, and we need a full-time town manager, not a part-time town manager. And you can say what you want, but 3 days is a part-time town manager, or administrator, however you want to say it. So my opinion is, I hope you vote against it, and that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Ms. LaPointe.
I'm Danielle Lapointe. I'm here as just a resident tonight. I live on Central Street. So first I want to say that while you may not believe this, I came here tonight hopeful, very, very hopeful that the concerns and the questions I had would be put to bed. I like to think I have an open mind. I like to think I can consider sides, but I feel like tonight's conversation has only made my list grow. The second thing I want to say is I feel like that this was written based solely on Mr. Hickey's talent. I think that Mr. Hickey is an incredible town manager. I think Winchendon is so fortunate and lucky to have found him and to have him here. And I think the risks that are in this are based only on the fact that he can handle them. This is a lot to ask of one person and one employee. It's a lot. I don't know how many hours you feel are devoted to Winchendon right now, whether it's 40, less than 40, more than 40. Add another town on to that. He's one human being and one employee, and eventually, even though he might be Superman right now, there's going to be a diminished return, and it's going to be to all of our detriment. And I hope Mr. Hickey doesn't think I'm attacking him, because I'm not. I'm just trying to think practically. And I really think it's something to seriously consider. What if he got hit by a bus 6 months into this? Who's going to be able to do this job the way this is written and the way we think he can? I don't think we have anybody in mind. So, some of my other points specific to this, I just have to. The only person attending was a reporter. I was here for the beginning of that meeting, and that public hearing was smushed in the middle of a long Board of Selectmen meeting, and I feel like there should have been a separate opportunity and advertisement, for lack of a better word, as CJ mentioned, because this is a big, big, big decision.
Are you referring to the subcommittee meetings?
You said only person attending was a reporter, I think the last one.
The subcommittee meeting on the third floor.
No. The
Okay.
last Board of Selectmen meeting that you
Oh.
specifically
I
referred
was
to.
referring to the subcommittee meetings.
Okay, I'm sorry if I misunderstood.
No problem.
My point is that this is a very, very important decision that has a forever impact on this town. If we go this direction, it's going to be very, very hard to turn around if we feel like that's needed. That's my point. Lee and Lennox, who this is kind of, based on, they took over 2 years to hammer out their agreement, and it was actually with Stockbridge, and Stockbridge's board voted to not do it because they saw risks, they saw complications. 2 years, as opposed to, I'm not sure how many months you said, but however many months.
But just on that point, we had a template to go with. They were working from scratch.
Yep,
That did save some
I get
time
that.
for us.
I get that. So I talked about hours. I mean, is this really only a 24-hour-a-week job that we have in our town? I mean, I feel like we have so much going on ourselves that 3 days a week, is it really? 8 times 3 is 24. Is that what we're saying this
He is
town
not working.
requires?
Just so I can clarify, I don't think he works an 8-hour day.
It's more than that. More than 8 hours. I would imagine he devotes to Winchendon at least 50, 60 hours of his time a week.
And he has to listen to me all the time.
Yeah, I'm saying this is just way too much for one person. Way too much. I mean, I had some other things, and as I listened to Ms. Labrie go through this, I mean, and Austin asked a question about, quote, discipline. I don't think Mr. Hickey would do anything to require discipline, but let's pretend it was someone else, right, stepping in. That means we have to waste our time, our energy, our money, our resources on doing Templeton's HR issues? I don't think that's wise for Winchendon. Why would we want to waste our time on that when we have pressing issues here?
I was a little concerned on that point myself.
So Mr. Hickey is only our employee. He's not an employee of Templeton. And so one of my things was, why would Templeton pay us? Why not Templeton pay him directly? But the employee thing answered my question. But so what if they get into a position that we were in however many years ago that was, 4 years, and they can't pay their bills? Now, Winchendon is struggling without Templeton's money coming in when they can't pay their bills just because of the way this arrangement's written. Now, it's not a certain, obviously, but I think it's something we need to consider. I talked about the excessive working and the diminished return. I think that section 2.5b actually would just need some grammatical changes, right? That's the only place in here we refer to it as a town manager. I think that would also need to be changed to chief administrative officer, just semantics.
Actually, I'd mention town council. That was left as town manager.
Interesting. And then my biggest point, right? So if this is a road we want to go down, this is a road we want to go down. If we decide that it's something beneficial to us, then that's fine. But I really do honestly believe that that's the people's choice. So if we refer to the charter, I do realize we've already conferred with town council about the second job, about whatever, and they feel that it's a Board of Selectmen decision. But if we look at the town charter at Article 4 under town manager, no, that's not the one I want, sorry, bear with me. We want Article 6, administration organization. The organization of the town into operating agencies for the provision of services in the administration of the government may be accomplished through either of the methods provided in this section. So method A, bylaws, subject only to an express prohibition in the general laws or as otherwise provided in this charter. The town meeting may by bylaw reorganize, consolidate, or abolish, create, merge, or divide, alter the term of office, the manner of selection, or if a multiple member body, the number of members of any town agency, that's the key word there, town agency, in whole or in part, establish new town agencies and may prescribe the functions, powers, duties, and responsibilities of any such town agency. Or B, the other method, the administrative code. The town manager, after consultation with the Board of Selectmen, may from time to time prepare and submit to the town meeting plans of organization or reorganization of any town agencies as provided in section 4.2. So we can skip a paragraph, blah, blah, blah. Before any such plan shall become effective, the town manager shall provide that the proposed organizational plan, which may be amended or revised as a result of information developed at public hearing. Now here's the important part of this. Be submitted to a session of the town meeting. The authority of the town meeting concerning the proposed organizational plan shall be limited to the approval or rejection of it. The town meeting shall not vote to amend or alter the proposed plan. So, one more, if you go to the definitions in the back of our charter, town agency. The words town agency shall mean any multiple member body, department, division, or office of the town of Winchendon. Now, I know we've for years referred to the office of the town manager. Again, if we're going to go down this road and we decide it's a road we should go down, it's the people's choice. I really do, reading this, think it's very clear that this would need to be brought to town meeting and would need the required 2/3 vote to proceed. And if that's what the town chooses, that's great. But I think that's key. And I know that was long. I'm sorry.
No, it's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll go with Mr. Miller.
Yeah, my name's Kevin Miller, River Street, Winchendon. I agree with everything this plant said. I've made many of my objections clear already. I'm not going to repeat those. I do have a couple of specific comments now that I've seen the actual agreement here. First one I want to bring forward is simply another wording change, I think, to try to get to your point, Ms. Anderson, about section 2.5a, last sentence. The Winchendon Board of Selectmen shall have sole authority to appoint the chief administrative officer. Consistent with the charter.
I like that.
I think that does what you were trying to do. Okay. Let me go through and raise some specific things here. I'll just start at the beginning. Okay, so the page under the parenthetical under figure 1. Notice about Winchendon shall hire an actuary. There was comment made at the last select board meeting that the state would cover the costs of doing this. It seems to me that fits. If we're going to pay an actuary, the state had better repay that, and I personally would want to see that in writing. Okay. So that was the one specific comment. The other comment I'll make, and I'll just stick with that theme of the state. There was a comment made several times, multiple times, that the town will receive consideration with grants and other things. Okay. Again, what specific rules and criteria for grant applications and consideration will be affected or waived as a result of this agreement? Until you get that from the state, you just have words, in my opinion. Get it in writing. Okay? I will make two other comments. First, to the openness of this whole process. It was stated there were executive committee discussions in April and May. In terms of public notice, that doesn't count. The first official notice to the public was June 27th, less than a month ago. Less than a month. The subcommittee meetings, it was stated specifically that there was not going to be public comment. So the first public comment was a week ago. If you think that's appropriate notice, fine, but I don't think many other folks think that.
If I may just interject for a moment, at the July 7th meeting.
Can you talk into the microphone? I'm sorry.
Certainly. The first meeting of the subcommittee, I know that Mrs. Cabasara was here, and the subcommittee's original thought was that we just needed to talk about this, but I did recognize her, and she did speak at that meeting. And if anyone else had requested to be recognized and was not called upon, then that was an error on my part. It was not intentional.
But you did not retract your words that were stated before her that said, we're not taking public comment until it goes before the board. So I do not believe this has received true public comment. Not much. The last thing I'll lay out is there were comments made up front during the selectmen comments that you're elected to listen to the people. This is a rhetorical question. I don't expect an answer. How many people have you received communication from that are for this and are against this? And are you going to vote according to what you have heard, the majority? Think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Nermsen.
Thank you so much. Felicia Nermsen, Oak Street. I do have to state that there are many of us here that have never agreed on anything, and we all agree on this. We're all sitting together, and we're all playing very nicely in the sandbox together. So thank you. I agree with everyone thus far. My questions relate to the DOR. What conversations have you had with the DOR regarding this? Is this a recommendation, a suggestion, a directive? What role does the DOR play?
That's a fabulous question. It was...
It's not a directive.
No, it was a suggestion. A strong suggestion?
No.
An urging?
No, it was a suggestion made to the board to look at the, excuse me, it was a wow. It was a suggestion made if we had any interest in looking at this and the possibilities down the road of what we could accomplish later on.
The possibilities of what the town of Winchendon could accomplish if we were to accept the suggestion?
It was the agreement was that, first of all, they recognized the performance of the town manager and how strong he was in moving that, how he turned it around here and his performance. Secondly, they look at long-term, how cities and towns are finding it harder to find managers, and you know, this might be a nice fit for both towns down the road, because you look at fixed costs keep going up and budgets are limited and they keep getting strangled. Populations are shrinking, putting more tax tightness on town budgets. This is a way to start looking at different ways to share costs. We currently have a compact with the state and the town of Templeton to look at regionalization of our fire chief, which has not moved forward because this has been in place. This is a way to cost share. You look at down the road, you might be able to cost share other things, equipment.
So this is really a greater plan around regionalization, period.
It could be in the future. We just don't know. We're looking at it from this particular point and see where it can go. How can we benefit? How can they benefit? How can the area benefit?
Okay.
I believe the first words out of my mouth when they approached us was, what's in it for us? Why would I do this? And the answer that we received was, you have shared procurement. So for instance, we'll say, you know, when we buy salt.
Yeah, I get all that. I understand all of that.
We're gonna do it in
Yep.
bulk,
I do.
yada, yada. Also, you know, that because we are, in essence, in good faith, working towards saving budgets, working cost effectively, then the state would look at us in a different light as far as granting us monies for different projects, you know, down the road, getting grants wherever we need it in other places. And did I get that in writing? No. Do I know
Right, I mean, I think,
specifically?
and I just think that that's an interesting statement to make, because I think that I'm always one that will look at the flip side of that. So if the answer is no, then are there going to be repercussions to the town down the line based on our decision not to move forward? So those are things that we as a community need to be aware of, that while this is a suggestion, it really is the hope of the DOR and the state to move smaller rural towns to regionalization, whether that's through sharing a town manager, regionalizing our school systems, regionalizing our fire chief, whatever that is. This is the direction that the state of Massachusetts is moving in. And should we decline their suggestion, there could potentially be repercussions to the town of Winchendon down the line.
I think that's my fear.
So if I could, Madam Chair, respectfully, the individuals that I have dealt with and the individuals in the Commonwealth, I think, have far more integrity than you're giving them credit for. I guess you're a glass half empty person. That's fine. You know, there are people who can be any way they want to be. But I would suggest to you that if you feel that strongly about the Department of Revenue going to somehow take repercussions against the town of Winchendon because they choose not to do this, I'd urge you to contact the AG's office and file a complaint. It's just not going to happen. They have far more integrity than that, ma'am.
But can I just argue, not that there would be repercussions exactly, but to put it like in teacher terms, we get a gold star next to our name because we are doing this. And so
We wouldn't get the gold star.
we would get the gold star, and they would look favorably on us if we were to try this.
Right, and with all due respect, Mr. Hickey, the DOR was not very helpful to us in our time of need. So,
Again, I disagree with you, but that's fine.
with all due respect. And again, with all due respect to Mr. Hickey, because I have been in a position where I have been responsible for multiple facilities with multiple profit and loss statements, but I've also had the infrastructure in place to do that, and to do that very successfully. And I do not believe that we had made the appropriate changes here in the town of Winchendon to our infrastructure to allow you to move out of this role and move into a role that is clearly not defined in a town that is moving right in the direction and is in chaos and having a lot of the same difficulties that we have experienced in the past. I believe that you are a very talented individual. I sat on the selection committee and I voted for you. And I am happy that I did, because I can say to this day that I'm very, very happy with the success that we are seeing. But also, there's only, you know, as a senior leader, there's only so much that you can do if you do not have the infrastructure in place to support you to be successful. So that's where my fear would be, is that we haven't made the appropriate changes here to allow you to do that, and we certainly don't have that infrastructure at the town of Templeton. So I would just caution us based on that. It has nothing to do, and it is certainly not a reflection on my really belief that you could be successful at this. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. I'll take Mr. Ward next.
Okay, I have a few items. Rick Ward, 13 Central Lane. I have a few items on each certain pages here, but first question I have of this board: how and when did you decide that the town manager position was only a part-time job? When did that happen?
Never happened.
Then how are we sitting here tonight? Because if you didn't feel it's happened, we wouldn't even be entertaining a subcommittee, because the basis of that committee is that he has the time to be here part-time and do this, so you had to have given the okay.
No, Mr. Hickey, with all due respect, understands the amount of work that will entail in this, and he has said very forthright that he knows he'll be working nights. He knows he'll be working weekends. He previously has
This
not been asked.
document makes it a 3-day job.
No, he'll only physically be in the office for 3 days.
It's a 100%, 60% in Winchendon, 40% in Templeton. I don't care what you call it, it's a part-time job.
Okay.
And if Mr. Hickey can do it, and I know he can, but this is not about Mr. Hickey, and I think he's the greatest town manager we've ever had, and I want to keep him in Winchendon full-time. So he can do it, but you're setting a precedent, because by this document, you've told Winchendon that this is really a 3-day position. And I think you're hurting him down the road, because if Templeton pulls out of this in 6 months or a year, I don't know how you can come to the citizens of Winchendon and say, oh, we're bringing Keith back as a full-time town manager, when you've just established that we've gone through 6 months or a year with a part-time position. How is that going to happen? You're going to be able to tell the voters that, oh, we changed our mind. Even though we've gone through 6 months or a year, you're establishing this as a 3-day part-time position. I don't think you should do that. So here are my questions.
Okay.
So if all the costs are pretty much shared 60-40 in this document, I have a real problem with the 15% and 18% cap for Templeton. So if health costs should skyrocket, and all of a sudden they have to pay tons of money, we all have to, why are we even having a meeting with them if it goes above their 15% cap? Would the meeting be to let them off and have less of a share?
No.
Then why is it in there?
It's in there because their fear was that if a future board decided to give Keith a $50,000 raise, they'd be on the hook for their share of it, more so than the health care costs. That's why the other piece was in there, to protect. And my point was, health care is the biggest wild card in there. And the thing it says right there that we'd come back and visit that because of that.
60-40 is what the share is, of whatever the cost is. If they don't like it, they can bail out of this agreement. Why do we have to make special considerations for Templeton? 60-40 is what it should be for everything. There are several sections in this where both Board of Selectmen are going to vote and the majority will rule, such as getting a temporary absence filled and so on. So what happens if Winchendon votes to hire this temporary person and Templeton says no? It doesn't identify what's going to happen, just says it'll be a majority vote of both boards. So what happens if one board says no? Is Winchendon the dominant on this? There's a lot in this document that hasn't been figured out, and by the questions tonight from the board itself, there's a lot more that needs to be looked into. If you're voting on this tonight, you're really doing a disservice to the people of Winchendon. The section that deals with, we've already established that the town manager would be here. It seemed to be the board that'd be Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and be in Templeton Thursday and Friday. Words like except as circumstances otherwise require, in either town as necessary, is just a can of worms. I mean, Templeton could come up with all sorts of problems and demand a lot of time. And it doesn't, we kept using the term emergency. There's nowhere in here does it say emergency problems. It just says, except as circumstances may require. That could be anything. Again, that needs to be tightened up. This whole issue, if we terminate, and I think Ricky McAllister was trying to get at this, but I think we've been dancing around this. So if we decide for a good reason after December 31st that we want out of this contract, say it's January or February, and we get something that comes up, say we have to get out of this, it's going to cost us almost $100,000 to do that, because we have to pay the 68, which is probably going to be close to 70 once you figure retirement in there. We have to pay for the year we're in to finish that out, which could be as much as $40,000 of Templeton's cost. So the answer is it could cost well over $100,000 for us to get out of a contract. And then I noticed that Selectman Saganowicz did say, and we would also have to pay the full salary for the town manager. But we really don't have to do that because we've established it's a 3-day job. So we're never going to have to go back and say it's now a full-time job. You are hurting the town manager down the road if this thing goes south.
Mr. Ward, could I just interject something in that with a concern that I had that I hadn't raised? I was talking to Mr. Hickey. There was an incident in Athol where, because we were promised that they would cover our costs, we've already discussed the town council fees, as well as actuary fees and whatever else might arise. The state had said that they would cover it. Well, Gardner was supposed to regionalize their dispatch, and the state spent $1 million making sure that they were able to regionalize, and Athol had signed a preliminary agreement to do so with an opt-out clause. Well, the townsfolk were very angry, and they asked their Board of Selectmen to opt out, and the Board of Selectmen opted out, and the state sent them a bill for $750,000, their portion of the improvements that had been made to the Gardner dispatch. It had nothing to do with Athol. Athol just wanted to opt out, and they're now facing that entire bill. And I think we need to think about that, and I just wanted to piggyback so I don't forget to mention it. It's important. Those bills could escalate.
So I've heard tonight words like, I believe this is how it's going to happen. It should be based on solid reasons. Its circumstances require. I mean, if the subcommittee is saying, I believe this is how this is going to happen, that's not good enough for me. It's not good enough for the town to say, I believe. Either it is or it isn't, and it should be written in this document.
If I may, Mr. Ward, I may have used that term because it is up to the Board of Selectmen as a whole to decide the final verbiage or whatever goes in this. I was speaking solely as
You were speaking as the subcommittee member, and that's what I'm talking about too. The other issue is, I know you say you have legal counsel, says you have the right to do this without a town meeting, without putting it on the warrant. I was on that charter committee, and that was never the intent to give you free rein to do this. The intent of the paragraph in the charter was because of a previous town manager who had outside work, and the town got very upset about that and felt it impinged on the work he was doing full-time. So that section of the charter was meant to specify that if the person took any other part-time job, anything that would pull from the full-time job, then they had to get the boss approval. So you may have legal counsel, you may be legal, but doesn't make you right. My final statement, I believe you are putting the town manager in serious danger of losing full-time employment with Winchendon down the road. I also believe that the boss was elected to support what is best for the residents of Winchendon, not what might be beneficial to Templeton, and not what might please the DOR. Sadly, by voting for this agreement, I believe you have lost sight of what is best for Winchendon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Yes, it is.
Hello.
Hello.
Fran Murphy. I just had a couple of questions. In this document, a couple of places it says the majority vote of the full Board of Selectmen in each town. What if one selectman didn't want to participate? Well, say four you wanted to opt out of this and one didn't. One could just not show up. By using the word the full board, shouldn't it be if you have a quorum? It's a question.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
That was raised at one of the committee meetings.
Because if you, let's say Templeton, the same thing. It says full board for Templeton. What if some guy in Templeton says, screw Winchendon, I'm not even gonna go to the meeting. So then it wouldn't pass with this verbiage.
Correct. Let's make a note
So
of that.
that's, and the only other thing I had is this temporary absence. Like someone had mentioned, if Keith got hit by a bus, what do you pay? It said after 10 business days, you could hire someone to do the duties. Would you pay him on the basis of Keith's salary, or would you work something out for, say he was going to be out 6 months? Would you work the person taking his place based on Keith's salary, or would you have to do another salary?
That's a good question, and we were in a predicament before where Ms. Daigle had to cover and be the acting town manager for a little bit, and she received a stipend. But I think along your lines, Mr. Murphy, what if Templeton didn't agree to that? Say, for instance, poor Mr. Hickey's in the hospital,
Yeah.
and you know, we're all comfortable
Yeah,
with
would they
Ms.
only want
Daigle
to pay
taking over
40%, or
for the
would they
time
pay
being.
half? Or
What if Templeton wasn't comfortable with Mr., and my goodness, what if she's not comfortable now? She's gonna cover both towns?
So that's, I just got one more thing. You're in another accident, Keith, by the way. Now, you're not gonna believe this, but as an umpire, I have insurance from my house to the game. Car insurance, health insurance and that. What happens if Keith's going back and forth from town to town? Is he covered by workman's comp by Winchendon or Templeton or both? Say he gets in a car accident and he has to go on workman's comp. Is that a workman's comp deal? How was that worked out?
Our employee. Would that make, I think that would make it ours because he is our employee.
All right, that's just all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, those are good questions. Mr. Carabasero?
Good evening, Guy Corbacero, School Street, Winchendon. Just a little history here. I guess town manager form of government came to Winchendon, I think it was in the early 80s, might have gone back into the 70s, I'm not sure, but it's off the top of my head. Now, in those days, town hall was open 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. The town manager worked 5 days. Fast forward up into the 2000s. Our town manager at the time, Jim Cradler, because there was a fuel crisis, cut the town hall down to 4 days. Fuel crisis over, and at that time, when he cut it to 4 days, he also had people working till 6, 7 o'clock at night on Monday, if I'm correct. So that historically, the job has always been 5 days. Now, when the fuel crisis stopped, Jim kept it at a 4-day work week, even though it is a full-time position, and to me, full-time is considered 40 hours a week. So when we come to, and now Mr. Hickey had the opportunity to move it back to 5 days because that is under his purview, whether the employees work 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. But a 5-day work week is the normal for most people, and what should have been and what is historically correct. Now, when we come to figure his salary at $93,750, he took 4 days, subtracted 1 day, made it 3 days, then added 2 days on the other side to Templeton. Now, at my figures, or what I feel it should be, if he's going to a 3-day work week, it should go down to $75,000, not $93,000, because he is not working. It's a 5-day job. It was figured on a 5-day, and it's always historically been. So I think these figures are a little skewed. So actually, what we have now is we have Mr. Hickey going from $125,000 to almost $166,000, and basically doing the same amount of work as far as the hours are concerned. Now we can say he's working a lot more, but I just wanted to point that out. It's not something that, you know, to argue with on, but I think he should be down to $75,000, and the other side would be Templeton's. So bring him up to the figure that he's getting now, maybe a little premium, but we're talking now almost a $40,000 raise in his salary here. Second point, I just think you mentioned chief administrative officer, but I think in the contract there's just an assumption. Town managers must mentioned once. I think there should be something in there that defines that chief administrative officer, you're speaking about town manager in our charter, because our charter does not use the term chief administrative officer, it uses manager. So I think there should be something that makes that leap and not just an assumption. Thank you.
Thank you.
And as I said before, I am opposed to this.
Thank you. Mr. Lapointe?
Hi, my name is David Lapointe. I live at 518 Central Street. First, I want to start out by just saying that, you know, I certainly appreciate everything that you all do on behalf of our community as elected officials who serve for nothing but for the goodness in your heart to make sure that this community is taken care of. I also want to thank the subcommittee, you know, for presenting this idea. Although I've heard tonight it maybe wasn't presented fully as perhaps it should have, but we're not going to. It's too late. We're here tonight, and the question is before us. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, you know, Keith, in the fact that he did an unbelievable job in bringing us back to financial footing after a long, you know, I could use some other words, but I'm going to say it was a long time that we were struggling as a community. So I'm going to take a different angle. I am going to approach it from history. And about a month ago, I was traveling through the towns of Lee and Lenox, not knowing at the time that Lee and Lenox would be coming into my life. Because 3 days later, after I got home, I learned about this idea of a shared manager. And I did my homework, and I looked into the history of why. Why would you want to share a manager? Because it's a question, and I didn't have any answers. So I redid the research. And in Lee and Lenox and Stockbridge initially, you know, their issue out there was simply that they were having trouble recruiting a town administrator. For Lee. Lenox had a long time serving, or town manager, but Lee had even a longer serving town administrator, but it was getting hard to recruit. You know, and Keith will attest to that it's a small pool of town managers and town administrators, especially good ones. So when I looked into that, you know, that was really their main driving force, was the fact that one town couldn't find themselves an administrator. So now you come over to Templeton and Winchendon, and the same theme I'm hearing is Templeton can't find a town administrator. So they put a date of August 1st, which was a date that you're all working with. That is, you know, there's no way around it. You have to do something by August 1st, because Templeton was taking a vote tonight as well on their the agreement. So as I, you know, have been listening and in the history, I can just predict the future a little bit. And what I can tell you is this, is that after a 2-year process, Lee and Lenox agreed to a shared manager. As Audrey reviewed the agreement for tonight, I reviewed the agreement in Lee and Lenox at the same time. And it is the same exact agreement with the exception of some, they had more powers and duties. So it was the same, and then I heard the comment that perhaps, you know, they already had a template, so it was easier for us to come up with one. Well, this is not easy, right? I am a strong proponent of the Charter of Winchendon that was passed in 1981 by town meeting vote after, right, enacted by the legislature. And I served as Board of Selectmen 2 times under 3 town managers, and I had the pleasure of hiring one, Dick Lack, who did a great job for this town. We've been very fortunate. We haven't had any problems attracting town managers to come to Winchendon at all. That's not our problem. And Templeton, on the other hand, you know, it's our neighbor, right? It's our rivalry on Thanksgiving Day, and to suggest that this will benefit the town of Winchendon, I haven't heard this tonight. In fact, what I've heard in Lee and Lennox is this, is that they just went out last month and hired an assistant chief administrative officer in the tab of $61,000 to help their town manager work the 2 towns. And then, I don't know if it's a plus or a negative, but the DOR, or the state actually, threw in $196,000 to implement this shared manager form of government. I would rather see that $196,000 come to our schools, come to our police, come to our fire. I haven't heard anything tonight of one benefit for the town of Winchendon, other than Mr. Hickey is going to be certainly challenged because you're increasing everything double union negotiations, double hirings for police chief, fire chief, services that he has to oversee, 2 towns. Never mind, this is not like a superintendent of schools whose focus is very limited to schools and principals and teachers. It's the same animal. Here, I just think that if the argument is being made that we can do this in a part-time basis, like Mr. Ward said, how can you go back to full-time? Because I'm going to say that this is not a part-time job. This is a full-time job. And it's even then some, because I know Keith puts in more time that he doesn't get compensated for. So my hat is off to Mr. Hickey for even entertaining the fact that he would take this job and add this to his life at this time. But I would just suggest to you that just because it's a good template doesn't mean it's a good template for Winchendon. I would suggest that we wait. We charted our own history, literally, when we grabbed that charter. You are now entering uncharted territory. But guess what? We can predict the future. Let's take a look at Lee and Lennox, see how that works out there, and see if it benefits one town or the other. Because at this point in time, I don't think that the benefit is here for us. I think the benefit, and it is quite apparent, is more for Templeton. And I would just ask each of you tonight that it's too soon. Oh, and by the way, one more piece of history. In 2020, there will be a town vote in Lee and a town vote in Lennox, and they will have the say as whether that is going to be a permanent by a sharing manager. So the townspeople will get their voice heard down the road in 3 years. I don't see that here in our agreement, but I would just say the agreement as written, the idea as presented, I would ask that each of you oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else care to speak this evening? Okay, I don't see anyone. I would like to thank our subcommittee for all of your work. I know you spent hours and hours laboring over this contract. And it was no small chore. I do have to agree, though. I think we've had a lot of people come up and voice their opinions. I've had a lot of people voice their opinions to me privately. I've had them call me and email me. And they do feel rushed. They feel like they're having this thrown down their throats. And that concerns me a little bit. That even though we've known about this for quite some time, it even went quite some time before anything moved on it for us. And then things moved very quickly. And we understand that they're moving very quickly because of Templeton's particular situation.
Madam Chair, if I may, then how would you define a timeline?
Well,
to do this,
I've
in
written
the opinion of, that we have rushed people.
till we get it right.
But
If we're going to do this, it needs to be done properly. Every point that's been brought up this evening needs to be
Oh,
looked
there's
at.
some good
We need to go
points,
back
yes.
to the drawing board, I think. We need to look at this. We have to come up with some serious conclusions on these points. They brought up some very valid points, obviously things that we haven't thought about, that you haven't thought about in subcommittee, that our attorneys even haven't thought about.
So, if I may, what would your recommendation be? If this is an appropriate time to ask? Or the board's recommendation? If, as chair, there is an intent to take a vote tonight, I'd just like to know what direction, whether the subcommittee will still be active or
I
whatever.
think with so
trying to get a
many
sense, that's all.
unknowns, I have a list of 16 possible unknowns that I feel like we need to iron out. That's too many. And you know, I have heard, my goodness, who asked me? I did keep count. And every person is not in favor. They're scared. People are scared. This is their town, and we fought hard. Was it you, Mr. Miller, that asked me how did we keep track? Yes, I did. One person was for it. And unfortunately, the person that contacted me, and she was for it, said because it'll lower her taxes. And it won't. I had to correct her and said, no, it really won't. What it's going to do is give us more buying power, hopefully.
Right. Okay, yeah, just.
And so that there's a lot of thought, there's a lot of care.
Madam Chair, even though, as well, a very valid concern that I've heard, and I'm sure all of you have as well, and we heard it here tonight, is even though I'm still torn about this issue, I'm going to be honest with you. However, I don't believe, as it was pointed out several times in our charter, I do not, even though legal counsel gave us the ability to vote on it, I personally do not believe it's our decision because it is such a high impact. And some things that legal counsel have mentioned through here, I'm not necessarily in tune with. So for me personally, I don't feel comfortable voting on this issue. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but.
I think Mr. LaPointe would agree that legal counsel has steered us down the wrong road before.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, just speaking as chair of the subcommittee, as someone mentioned, well, first, I need to back up. You know, as I said at the last meeting, I haven't said whether I'm for this or against it, but I'm giving it my best shot. And I do appreciate all the comments. I've read them. I just saw the emails late this night, so I did not get a chance to reply. As someone said earlier, Templeton is doing the same issue, having the same conversation this evening. If it is the pleasure of the board, we have made notes, comments, etc. Send it back to subcommittee and whatever, if you feel that this is workable, or the decision needs to be made tonight. Just, you know, do we vote up or down, or do we try to still work it and then come back again?
My feeling is, and I couldn't help again over the weekend remembering not too long ago and seeing Ms. LaPointe, Ms. Nermsman coming up and pleading with the previous Board of Selectmen and saying, please don't take this vote tonight. Please stop and think about it. The people are not behind you. And those people didn't listen. And there's a heck of a lesson to be learned there. We need to listen. We can always send this back to committee. I personally concur with Selectman Husselby that you know, we could bring this back to town meeting floor in the fall, but because this is not going to be solved by August 1st. It just won't be.
No, I recognize that there's no question that's not going to be.
Thinking not by September 1st.
Yeah, and as I stated before, if nothing happens by August 1st, and I've said this in the meetings, we go on as status quo. We have Ms. Hickey. Whatever happens in Templeton, they have to deal with. Absolutely, and that is understood. So, as I've said before,
So
if August 1st goes by, then...
if I might, because I guess what it comes down to is, does this board still want to continue with this? And the answer is either yes or no. So I make the motion that either we continue the discussions or we don't. A vote to continue. So if you want to continue, because we're not going to vote on it this evening. But there's the question is, do you want to continue?
I think it really kind of hit home. Maybe Mr. Miller or Mr. Ward spoke, and it had been insinuated or implied that this would be good for us in a number of different ways, and Winchendon will benefit. I want to know, I want to see something in writing. I want to see how it will benefit, who it will benefit. I'm worried about our schools. I'm worried about our DPW.
Yeah.
I want to see. So I don't want to shut the door. I'm not willing to shut the door on this yet. I would love to see subcommittee go back. Maybe Templeton is interested as well. How is this going to help us specifically? What are you going to do for us specifically?
So the pleasure of the board would be to continue with the discussions.
I would like to see it continue. I don't want to rush to any judgment. I don't want to rush to a no. I don't want to rush to a yes. I want things done thoughtfully and carefully. That's my personal opinion.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
To go along with that as well, if Templeton does want this deal and they want it bad enough, they'll wait until, I believe personally, that our people vote on it.
Right. I think at this time it'd be proper to entertain a motion.
So I make the motion that we continue on with this agreement in subcommittee till it's,
Send it back to subcommittee.
send it back
for
to
review
subcommittee
and
for
revision.
review with the additional changes that were brought up tonight.
I think at this point to review, go back, review the agreement. And subcommittee possibly check in with the powers that be that need to answer the questions that the people have brought to us. Is that possible?
If I may, Madam Chair, then I would want to see a list of those questions. Again, get it in writing. Give us some specifics. Give the subcommittee, I've made some notes based on what was said tonight. Everybody's made notes. Put together a punch list and send it back to committee for review of the punch list.
I have my list that I'll be happy to type up and send to you.
Well, and also whatever, other comments that the member of the board had. I think it's pretty likely that every comment from the audience was picked up by one of us, so that should cover just about everything from that aspect.
Hopefully so, yeah.
But that would be, if it is being sent back to subcommittee, to have that list sent to the committee for guidance.
Madam Chair, just a quick question if I could. Does the subcommittee bring it back to this board, or is this board, I think the board needs to decide whether there's an interest or willingness, I guess, to vote on this as a five-member board of selectmen, or whether you want this to go to the town meeting, because that's really the crux here. I've heard at least one board member say, I don't really care for an applause, thank you. I think I've heard one board member say they aren't comfortable voting for it, and that's certainly their opinion, and I respect that. But I'm not sure the committee needs to take as much, move is potentially and meet next week, for example, to talk about this if we're gonna wait until May. So I think this board respectfully needs to decide whether or not they're willing to bring this up and vote on it as a board, or whether or not they feel as though there's a need to bring this to town meeting as a charter change.
Well, don't we have a special town meeting in the fall?
We do? I'm sorry, and that, you're right. We could do that in the fall. I apologize.
Just for clarification, if I may, CJ, you said you're not comfortable voting on it.
Correct.
Just tonight because of all the questions? Is that what you're referring to? Or the board making the decision versus the town?
And I'll make that clarification too. And I just want to commend sorry, just to bring it back on a side note, I commend both of you and the subcommittee for all the work that you've done. This is a good start.
Thank you.
If we were to if we were to adopt this, and I'm not saying whether I'm for or against,
right,
because I don't believe that is my place or anyone on the board's place to make that decision, to answer your question. I believe that's up to the townspeople in our fall meeting.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor to send this back to subcommittee for refinement.
With a punch list.
Right.
Okay.
And is there a second for discussion?
I'll second for discussion.
Thank you. And then my intention would be, once it goes back to subcommittee and it's refined and some of these questions are answered to the satisfaction of everybody, it needs to come back to the board for approval, and then we can at that point choose whether we're going to send it out to town meeting for a vote, or whether we will keep that privilege.
Sweet.
So we'll take it one step at a time. Let's send it back to, right now, we're going to send it back to subcommittee. It will come back here. Hopefully everything's open, everything is public, so that we can continue to hear from the residents. And as it comes back in a much more completed form, to the satisfaction of our satisfaction as well as the townspeople's satisfaction, we can then make that motion of what we would like to go forward with. Okay?
Point of order. Templeton voted 4 yes out of 5, but sent back for revisions first.
Thank you. Mr. Ward.
So is this motion saying that it's coming back to the
Please come to
Can you,
Sorry, sir. Can you please come to the microphone?
Can you come up to the microphone? I'm sorry. They need to hear you.
Just a little clarification. Is this motion saying that it's going to be revised, all the things that happened tonight looked at, then it's going to come to the selectmen, and if they approve it, it's going to the fall town meeting for vote?
No, at that point, when it comes back and the subcommittee again comes to us and with their presentation of all their hard work, then we will make that choice.
Of whether it goes to town meeting?
We will take a vote of how many of us want it to go to town meeting for the people's vote.
We don't even know if Templeton said the same thing you guys are saying.
Okay, but I'm not concerned with Templeton.
I'm just
really concerned with us.
right.
So,
And there seems to be a little bit of a conflict on the board, and it might have to come down to a vote as to who believes it should go out to town meeting in the fall, and how many of us feel that we should have the right to vote.
So what we
for it.
can believe is that the town meeting in the fall is one of the options that's going to happen when it comes before this board. It's an option.
It's an option.
Okay.
We're leaving that open.
And if I may, I think that the motion, we can do a separate motion if necessary, but one motion just to send this back to the subcommittee.
Correct.
With the list for revision, and then when done, they will present it back to the board.
Sure. I think at this point, with our new information, it'd be interesting to see what Templeton has for revisions as well.
And then if someone wants to make a second motion about what the board does with it once the subcommittee has it,
Sure.
gives it back to the board.
Yeah. It's a process.
Yes.
It's a big, scary step. Miss LaPointe.
Their revisions were to protect their interests in a few more areas. I'm not sure what else there is to protect for Templeton, but that's their revisions.
Okay.
Thank you. Protect their interest, okay. All right, so we have a motion on the floor to send the agreement back to subcommittee with the punch list. And I second it for discussion. Just trying to get my head around it. Okay.
Oh, I just want to make sure there's no more discussion. We all know what direction we're going.
There's a hand up if you wish to recognize.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Ms. Santos.
Tina Santos, 117 Mill Street. I was just curious with the uncertainties or the concerns in regards to Templeton's vote tonight, as well as the uncertainties here. Would it make sense to have a joint meeting back after the revisions are finished, have a joint subcommittee, or have Templeton's subcommittee members come back and that way, when we're meeting and you're discussing it, if there are any questions, we're not kind of going back.
But we
Is
want
that
to, we don't want to insult them. As you know, sometimes I feel like I can speak more freely and more honestly.
That's true.
Yeah, and
that's true. Yeah, you won't.
And that was, excuse me, that was actually one of the things at our last subcommittee meeting was, do we do a joint presentation or whatever, and the sense was Winchendon people would be more comfortable talking to Winchendon people. Templeton people would be more comfortable talking to Templeton people.
That's true. No,
So
now that you said
that's
it,
why
I
we did
agree.
it two separate. And I would stay with that.
All right, great, thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Saginamus, did you have a question that you're mulling over?
Can you just remind me what the motion is exactly? So that
The motion is to send it back to subcommittee for review.
And
With the,
we decide on town meeting after that?
Yes.
Okay, well, for that reason, I won't support the motion. Personally, I'd hate to see the subcommittee do all this work. I still think that the town should decide this in November. It's 4 months away.
But we'll make that discussion after they go over this list.
Again,
If Templeton is
okay,
going to look after
we've worked on
their
this for a
interest-
month. Work has commenced on this for a month compared to 2 years. If it takes 7 months or a year, again, what's the rush? I really,
I'm not rushing you.
I resent the statement that the subcommittee said that they didn't want to rush this. I do feel like it's been rushed. I saw this for the first time this morning, and it was amended 5 minutes before we had our meeting. So I wasn't even ready to vote on this tonight anyways. So and even back to the point, even in the executive session, they're released now, so I can disclose this. I did say that I think the town should vote on this. This is a big thing. The only reason why I supported the idea is because, I don't know, I'm a fan of education, so I even asked in the meeting, would you provide a study? And at the time, I thought that they said yes, but apparently that didn't happen. They provided a pretty comprehensive study for the Lee-Lennox-Stockbridge agreement. I'm sure maybe some of you have read it. I thought the same thing was going to happen. It really outlined, sort of like the SWOT analysis of this agreement. There's a lot of questions. You noted 16. But I think all of this, if the committee decides to continue working on this, and then in November, if it's pushed forward to town meeting, they say no, why not get their approval first and then commence the work? That's just
Because
my
I
opinion.
think you're putting the cart before the horse.
Madam Chair, yeah.
I don't think so.
Speaking for myself, I'm willing to put the time in now so that in the event that even if it comes just to the board or to town meeting, it's as complete as we can make it. It's not a work in progress. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Are you going to present the whole comprehensive agreement at town meeting, or are you just going to do sort of like what we did with Ingleside, a basic question? Do you support it or no?
Well, I would at town meeting think
Oh, I'm
that,
sure you could
I would
talk
think
about
at town
it.
meeting.
Hey, we spoke a long time tonight about this.
Right.
I'm sure you would. I'm sure the
I
town
would
manager
believe
and-
that town meeting would want if we were going to present this to town meeting, if it was to go down that route, this agreement would have to be spelled out crystal clear, completely revised,
Certainly.
so the voters have the choice to make the decision. Because that would be what they want. Now, but may I finish, please? The thing is do you want to craft the agreement to have it to present to the voters? Or at this point, do you want to do nothing, wait for the voters to speak, and then crank up the wheel again?
Mr.
I
Barbaro,
prefer...
I highly doubt, especially after all the work that was done tonight, I highly doubt that it would just be paused. Even if we decided not to send it to subcommittee, I'm sure someone would ask these questions and get these questions answered. You know, it's not like, you know, this agreement, we just throw it in the trash.
I'm not, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is,
Sort of.
if we were to present this to town meeting, I would rather the voters have a full and comprehensive contract in front of them that they can look at and go, I agree with this the way it's spelled out, it's answered my questions, yes or no. That's where I think the subcommittee can go back and present to you and say, here's the agreement with all these things that have been presented. We'll still have more hearings along the way, obviously, but the agreement will be done to the satisfaction of the board, plus the questions that were revised to us. And then you could go and say, we will then vote and say, at that point say, we're going to vote to bring this to town meeting in the fall. The voters will then have an additional 3 months to read the agreement, but at town meeting, I wholeheartedly would support the agreement be read to the voters so they could make a full and comprehensive thing.
Madam Chair?
Ms. Lapointe?
Fall town meeting happens anyway, right?
Correct.
So send it to town meeting. If the work is done, you present the entire agreement. If the work is not done, you present the simple question. It can still be on the warrant because the meeting happens anyway. It just depends on how much work you get done.
Yeah, that was going to be my point. If you want to make it formal and send it back to committee, but I would like to see in the motion that it will go to town meeting. I just personally.
So, Madam Chair, I apologize. So I think that's where we're really getting caught up is, do we want it to go to town meeting or do we want it to go to the board? Either way, this is going to have to be worked on, so we are going to have to eventually vote on it. But I think where Selectman Syganowicz and myself are a little bit hesitant is just, I want to see this go to town meeting, and that's where I want to see it go first.
I think where I was getting hung up is in wanting it to come to the board is because all warrants come to the board before they go on town meeting floor. We approve all warrants. I want it to come to the board first, and then we can discuss having it go on to town meeting, if this is what we'd like to present to the town meeting, and that was my point.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Ward?
I still feel we're dancing around the public interest here. I know you want to say it comes to the selectmen and then you'll decide that it goes to the town meeting. I don't see what's so difficult about a motion that they will work, the subcommittee will work on this, get it ready for presentation at the fall town meeting. It still has to come to you for approval, but the end result should be the town meeting. That's all we're asking.
Thank you.
Agree.
I think, judging at least the majority of the board, prefers that this goes to town meeting eventually. Because I think that becomes a convoluted motion. Well, then simplify it for me, if you would.
Well, we have
Come on
enough
up.
on the floor at the moment that we need to vote on.
My suggestion would be, and chime in if I miss something, I make a motion to send this agreement back to subcommittee to ultimately be voted on at town meeting.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
When I indicated that I felt the motion that we have in front of us should be just to send it back to subcommittee, I said, or may not have been clear, that at that point, if that passes, a second motion of what the board wants to do with it once it gets returned to the board could be appropriate. I'm just saying two separate motions as
true.
opposed to one. That's my only comment there.
We do have a motion, it has been seconded.
The only hesitation I have with that is, what if the second motion fails? You know, I know you can make it again, but why not just, I mean, if we're going to do two motions, and hopefully the board supports it, why not just combine it into one? You know? If Mr. Barber would amend his motion, if he's willing.
No. I think we make two motions, because I want to know if we want to go forward with it. Because if it goes back to
Okay.
subcommittee, it goes back to subcommittee to get revised or fixed, or whatever the thing is. I don't know what the other side has to say. If we say, hey, we're gonna bring it to town meeting at the next subcommittee meeting, and that won't be till May, that might kill the agreement right there. I'm not saying it's not too bad. I'd like to hear out what has transpired, just like they want to hear out what has transpired also.
About inside, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'd like to hear, you know, what's, you know, here we've got a punch list. These might be very similar things.
Yeah, I don't see what the, I don't see what the, how you think it might end. I mean, let's say we vote on your motion and to the town meeting, and let's say discussions, you know, they end in subcommittee. Okay, then we won't have to put it on the warrant.
Correct.
So then the idea will be gone. I mean, if Templeton's, you know, they just said no and they no longer want to negotiate, then we don't have to worry about it in the fall. But I just think I really don't see the purpose of leaving it out. I mean, to be honest, I mean, it sounds like you want to negotiate, but you don't want to ask the question.
Oh, the question will get asked.
But will it? I mean, it sounds like you don't even want to support it. You won't even put it in your motion.
Because at this point, I'm still thinking the thought process through. I believe that if we have a crafted agreement to bring to town meeting, that will be fine and dandy. But it's still got to come before this board, and this board has to decide ultimately whether it wants to vote on it as a motion by the board or a motion for town meeting. I don't think everybody has decided totally what they want to do.
All right, if you want to proceed with your motion, I will make a motion right after then.
Let's vote on his motion, it's been seconded.
If you're not willing to amend, yes.
I'll amend my motion.
For town meeting?
Sure.
Okay.
Can I get a second?
Are you gonna restate it? Can you restate it?
You second
I
it,
wrote down what they
Oh, awesome. Okay. I make a motion to send this to subcommittee to ultimately be voted on at town meeting. That's my amended motion.
Do you want to say that you withdrew it? No, just second it. Okay, I will second that. Was that the right language? I'm sorry, I wasn't listening fully.
That was what she
It
said.
was verbatim.
Okay.
I'm a good note taker. Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Chair will vote aye.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Don't adjourn yet. Madam Chair, is it the desire of this board to have the same members represent in the subcommittee or replace with other members of the board?
I think I'm very happy with the members of our subcommittee, if you don't mind serving.
I think you all have done,
okay,
I think you
just-
guys have done an excellent job.
I really, I
I'm
do,
glad
I
to. I
don't
just
want you
wanted
to
to make sure that everyone's
misinterpret
okay.
the criticisms.
No.
Because
You know me,
I don't
it's
think
fine.
anybody could have foreseen this. This is, as Mr. Lapointe, or Attorney Lapointe said, this is uncharted waters. We don't know.
That's fine, and I'm glad to. I just wanted to make sure the board was comfortable with the same subcommittee.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Are you ready now?
Yes.
A motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye.